Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartophilus.
Coach Greg, what's going on?
Not much, man. Thank you so much for having me tonight. And I start by saying thank you to my wife.
Oh, this is going to be so much fun. I mean, your experience in the coaching industry. I mean, we just spent all this time off air talking about your time in Greece. Like, this is going to be a really, really fun episode. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, I will not be speaking Greek on this episode, but I am excited to chop it up with you.
Definitely. So getting right into it, I mean, sure, I'm sure everyone asks you about like your experiences overseas or what you're doing now with Colombia, but I want to take it way back to before you got into all this cool coaching stuff and really what made you fall in love with the game when you were younger. What really sparked that interest for you when you said, you know what, I want to work in this game for the rest of my life?
Taking it way back, I'm one of four boys, no sisters. So like you could imagine the household was just kind of a never ending competition, which usually took the form of sports in some way. So I remember growing up where my youngest brother was born. It was two boys against my youngest brother, my dad, wiffle ball in the side yard. So just playing sports a lot. But I think what ends up happening a lot of times is, I think this happened to me especially, but when I really fell in love with the game, it was because like I fell in love with the guys that I was playing with and just constantly wanted to be around them, wanted to be working out with them, wanted to be playing with them, and just had a really good synergy with those guys on the court. So a lot of the guys they ended up playing AAU with were guys that I knew since I was 8, 9 years old. But them have gone on to have great careers, both in the game and out of the game. But really that bond that I formed with them on the road at AAU tournaments is really what developed my love for it. And then when it came to the coaching side, my parents were both public school teachers. So I initially thought, I was like, oh, I think I want to do the teaching thing too, maybe be a high school coach on the side. What I quickly learned though wasn't always as excited to teach about the scientific method or the Roman Empire or whatever it is I was supposed to teach that day as I was to teach a backdoor cut, the proper box out technique or 5-out offense. So I quickly realized I just needed to channel that educational excitement that I had and just put it into basketball because that's what I truly love. So it's kind of my journey, the playing side and then the teaching and coaching side.
Definitely. So that transition from player to teacher to coach is incredible. And I can't wait to talk. I mean, that teacher to coach one is especially interesting because that's a background, it's obviously teaching and coaching are so intertwined, but most people don't come from going from teaching to coaching. It's pretty fascinating. All my guests have never had that happen. So that's really cool. But kind of sticking into the teaching world, like you were really, really young when you went from when you went over to Greece to teach there and all that stuff. So how did that even come about for you where like that opportunity came for you to travel and do that?
I always wanted to live or study abroad. I still kind of get that itch from time to time to go back over to Europe or South America or Asia or somewhere else, just because I love that experience of just immersing yourself in something that's different than what I grew up with. So I knew that wasn't really an option as I played in college. It wasn't an option to study abroad. So I knew when I graduated, I wanted to go over when I was still young enough and still sort of transient, mobile enough to do that. So I looked at a few different things. Unfortunately, 2009 was not a great year to graduate college. That was sort of the height of the recession. Not a lot of people hiring. So I did go off to grad school because I did think that teaching was something that I wanted to get involved in. So I got my master's in teaching for a year. And while I was there, I really just talked to a lot of the professors about some opportunities that they might know of overseas. So luckily, one of my professors had just gotten back from a conference in Italy, and she kind of put me in touch with two schools over there. One was in Trieste, Italy, which is right on the border of Italy and Slovenia. So I looked at that opportunity. And the other opportunity was this opportunity in Greece. So it was kind of, I really didn't know much about it looking back. It was kind of hilarious. One of my professors in college asked oh, what school are you going to over there? And I was like, yeah, I don't actually know. I don't know the school. It was I don't even remember looking back now why I chose what it was, but I knew that who I was, I needed to, I grew up in the Philadelphia area. I went to school in the Philadelphia area. I went to grad school in Massachusetts, but that's a stone's throw away in the grand scheme of things. I knew I wanted to branch out and experience things, and I wasn't good enough to go play overseas. So I kind of wanted to take a different path. And like I said, teaching being the thing that I thought I wanted to do, that led me to teach English to a bunch of 7-year-old Greek students who were yelling at me in Greek all day. But man, it was an amazing experience and something that I find myself talking about more often than I ever thought I would.
So you said they were yelling at you in Greek all the time. And what were they really saying? Well, give us some insight as to what word maybe they might have been throwing at you.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So I taught first through sixth grade. So in each of the class, I kind of had a different role. Like some of the classes, I was the lead teacher. Other classes, I was just kind of there to be like entertainment for the day, you know, bring the American guy in and listen to his accent. In each grade level, they had different English levels. So like there was a sixth grade native language level. And that's essentially like you're teaching a bunch of American or English kids. I mean, they're speaking perfect English. But then the other end of that spectrum is like a first grade foreign language. That's literally like you're just singing songs and coloring all day. And I, as a Greek man yourself, I think you know that the Greek people are very passionate and emotional people. I think that bleeds into their children at a very young age. So I quickly learned a really good classroom in a first grade foreign language has nothing to do with the order of the classroom. It's not like, are they sitting in their chairs? Are they all quiet when they're working? And quickly I realized it was like, are they having fun? Are they trying to use the English words I'm teaching them? And are they not yelling Malaka at me every 10th word? So I don't remember, I'll be honest, I don't remember a lot of the words. But one thing that was really interesting is part of my contract was I was not allowed to talk to them in Greek. My Greek was pretty bad because I lived with all Americans when I was over there. So it was really interesting. Like I felt like by the end of the year, I really understood Greek pretty well because these little kids were just yelling it at me all day. But I was forced to respond to them in English. So it was like an immovable object or whatever that impossible. What is it? What's the phrase?
Unstoppable force.
An unstoppable force. Yeah. That's what it was. My English and their Greek, just going at each other. But we got through it with some silly songs and. God, I still have some of them stuck in my head. Red, red, touch your head. Blue, blue, tie your shoe. There was a lot of that in my life. Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure, but their Greek was definitely the unstoppable force because they're just coming at you a million miles an hour with it, and you just got to take it.
Oh yeah, I mean, you just think about being 6 years old, some weird guy coming at you, you know, in a different language you don't understand. God bless those kids and their parents, though. They were great.
That's so funny thinking about all that. The coolest thing about all that is the fact that you were able to connect with people so different from yourself, both like in age and in culture and all these differences. And it kind of is something that bled into your coaching. And I see you talk about that all the time in terms of how you connect with players now. But what was like for you maybe connecting with people like that? Like I said, it's a completely different age group, completely different culture, like so many differences, but you were able to kind of still in some ways relate to them.
I think one of the things that has helped me with that is I'm definitely naturally a curious person, but I really found that the easiest way to connect with people is just to ask a ton of questions. And obviously, you know, like I said, being curious helps with that because you're genuine in the questions you're asking. But man, even little kids got stories to tell, you know, and those are real stories and those mean a lot to them. And I really think if you're just genuine and you sit down and you get to spend a little time with someone and you're genuinely asking them about their life, I just think it's the easiest way to connect. And, you know, I know our head coach now does a really good job sort of creating a lot of those informal times when coaches and players can connect on that level. I'm not a very good interviewer, I would say. I think the job you're doing right now, I'd probably be pretty terrible at. But, you know, if you get me down and we're having a smoothie together or a slice of pizza and it's just a pretty casual conversation, I like to think that I'm good enough at being truly interested in the person I'm sitting across from that I'll walk away from a 10 or 15-minute conversation and feel like I really have a good grasp about what's important to them and sort of what their story is. So
you obviously have a natural skill for it, but I noticed from your website that you do your homework for these interactions, right? I mean, a lot of times you ask your players for a book recommendation or a movie recommendation. So
yeah.
That's incredible. That is so cool to me. So what made you even think to start doing that?
There's a short answer. Definitely, I'm a nerd. You know, like I love reading. I love learning dumb facts. I love pretending like I'm super smart. I just kind of eventually, like, you kind of hit a point in your life where, like, I'd read all the coaching books. Like, no offense, but I'm done with all the business books and the coaching books. Like, I think you're still at an age where, like, you should be just devouring them. But eventually they all end up saying the same stuff, just packaged with a different sports team or a different business. They all talk about the same stuff. So I was kind of just in a rut like 6 or 7 years ago. And I was just thinking about ways to connect with the guys that I was coaching at that point up at Colby College. And I was like, you know what? These are like smart kids. These are smart guys. Like, I'm going to ask what their favorite book is. And then that quickly bled into, I'm going to use this as a way to get to know the kids that are coming into the program a little bit better. So I'm going to ask everyone for their favorite book. And then since I know some of them are probably avid movie watchers at this age, like I'm going to get one of their favorite movies too. And it was really interesting because I think one of the things that I've found over the years is, one, kids probably aren't reading as much as they should, like for pleasure. But the other really interesting thing is, like, it's really interesting to hear the book that they pick, because I think it says a lot about like what their principles and values are, and also like what part of themselves they identify with most. So, there's a girl on our team a few years ago. She came from a single parent household, had a pretty rough upbringing. And it was clear to me, I had never talked a lot about that with her, but it was clear to me from the book that she had me read that was like a really important part of our identity. And I had never really spent a lot of time talking to her about that. So I kind of asked her about it, and she was like, yeah, like, it's definitely something I used to talk about a lot. It's something that's sort of important to the way that I've grown up, but I had never really gotten that out of her before reading the book. So that stuff is cool. And also, like I said, I'm just kind of a nerd. So it was a cool way to get some different books that I would never read, sort of if I walked into a Barnes and Noble on my own.
I think that's such a cool way to connect with players. And I mean, I kind of always have felt that I naturally do it like the same way you kind of feel the same way, like you're kind of good at just communicating with people and asking questions and being naturally curious and making it really getting to be able to relate with people. But at some point, right, I mean, that's just a way to go. That's just the next level of it. Having that shared interest and taking an interest and saying, you know what, I'm going to devote 2 hours for a movie. And I mean, way more than that for a book, to really get to know you and what you're interested in. What was the best book or best movie in terms of like you walked away from that going like, wow, I wish I read this book, 10 years ago?
So there's like a sports book, I would say, and a non-sports book. The sports book, I would say, was the Pistol Pete biography. I think it's just called Pistol, maybe.
I've heard great things about that one. I've never read it though.
Yeah, it's just really good, but I felt like that story did such a beautiful job, like explaining the person that recommended it to me. I'm going to give him a shout out right now. His name is Pat Dickert. He played for me when I was an assistant up at Colby in Maine, and he's now like pseudo famous in the basketball trainer world, but he's like a little 6'2" white kid that dunked from the free throw line and is just like an insane, just a workout guy. Like he's just lived and breathes basketball. And that was the Pistol Pete story, and just kind of like his relationship with basketball, I think really shone through from that book. And then I would say a non-basketball book, I actually just read this 3 years ago, I believe. It was Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. Man, it was a powerful book. And I'm not a huge Trevor Noah fan by any stretch, but I came away from that book with just an amazing like appreciation for who that guy is and what he sort of came from, and just the idea that an American has of like what racism is and just what the concept of race is very rooted in our American context. And Trevor Noah's from South Africa. It was just, man, it was like really powerful to read about his childhood as a biracial kid in South Africa. And that was actually recommended to me by a biracial player who's still on our team now at Columbia. And it was really hard to read at times, but just like, whew, it was a really cool experience. And obviously race relations in America have been front and center for especially like the last 20 months or so. So that was just like a really powerful read for me in the context of who recommended it, but also just as an American reading a story about race relations in a different part of the world.
And that's just, those are just 2, 3, 4 of the, I'm sure, dozens of books that you've read through recommendations of your players, which is so cool that you do that. And it's something I definitely have to try to replicate in my coaching, because I think that's just a great way to say, I genuinely care about you, and letting people know that you care about them, which, obviously that's 90% of the battle is in terms of relating to someone, is convincing them and proving to them that you really do care about them as people more so than basketball players.
No doubt. No doubt. I think the old Pat Summitt quote, they don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. It's sort of the most succinct way to say that. And, our coach has a really nice way of like telling recruits this when we're going through the process. Like, she's a really tough coach and she demands like really high standards. And she always says like, hey, we're going to coach you really hard, but we're going to love you harder. I just think it's like a beautiful way to describe like, yes, you are going to be challenged here, but you're also going to be really supported here. Like, we're going to give you a ton of support and care and attention. I think all the coaches on our staff kind of do it in their own way, sort of outside of there's no 9 to 5 in college basketball, but sort of the normal parameters of film, extra workouts and rebounding and stuff like that. I think all of our coaches do a really nice job of like inserting their personality to show our players that they care in their own special way.
So you mentioned those like predefined blocks of time, right? Like practice from 6 to 8, those are the formal times where the team's together and everyone's all buttoned up. But there's also the informal times, maybe, right? Like 10 minutes after practice when that maybe isn't the case. And that's kind of where culture is built. So how do you maybe realize that's kind of where those relationships really take full effect?
I'm so glad you said that. Like, I always say this, is that culture is not built at practice, like culture. But I kind of flip it the other way. And what I always say is like, culture is destroyed in informal times. Like, that's where it's actually destroyed. Because I think you can build up the culture in those, every team like reads a book over the summer, and then they have workshops in the fall, and they talk about their principles, their values, their mission, and whatever. Everyone has those buzzwords. Man, when the girls go down to the locker room after practice, like, what are they saying to each other? When you hop on the bus, like, how do the coaches interact with one another? How do the coaches interact with the players? When you're at a team dinner, like, what are the conversations like? And I'm so happy you said that, because I just wish more people understood that is where culture is built or destroyed, is in those informal times. And I think people put so much time and energy into those formal practices. But man, like, one sarcastic statement to the wrong person at the wrong time, like, you could lose that kid for a month. And I just think it's really important that coaches know that, because we have such a huge influence on these kids' lives. And I'm not saying you can like never turn it off. You can never flip the switch and just have fun. But man, you got to be really, really careful during those informal times, because like you said it so beautifully, like, man, that is where the money is made. And this is where I think a lot of coaches get in trouble, is they preach values that they don't live. Kids are too smart. They're too smart. Like, they see right through that. And if you're not living those values every day, it just kind of falls on deaf ears. They see right through that. And then the whole thing kind of becomes a sham. So whatever your values are, man, just live that, put that onto your kids, make that a part of your program, and you'll be better off for it. Like, don't try to copy someone else's acronym or throw some quote up on the wall that you don't live by. So I'm really glad that that's something you noticed at this time, because I was not. You're way further along than I am at this point. I can tell you that much.
Hey, thank you. But I mean, there's so many of those things, and time and place has been, me right now getting promoted to varsity coach has been something that I've been thinking about all year. A lot of the guys that I'm coaching now as seniors, I'm now a senior in college as well, but they were freshmen in high school when I was a freshman in college, and I was coaching them on the freshman team. So I've kind of seen these guys grow up, which is weird now seeing them as seniors, because I still kind of refer to them in my head as freshmen. Like, oh yeah, I'm with the freshman team. And I'm like, wait, no, I'm not. I'm with the varsity team. Because these guys were with me 3-4 years ago.
By the way, love the jerseys in the background.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that means a lot to me.
Yeah,
with Xavier.
The David Lee one kind of threw me for a loop there for a second. I was like, is that David Lee?
Yeah, so there's David Lee and Wilson Chandler. There was a big MSG Christmas giveaway at work.
Oh, okay.
So they had them all on the table, and I really wanted a Meta World Peace one, because I think that'd be a great message to have on the, which world big letters. But I got snagged by one of the higher ups.
Oh, okay.
So
but the Xavier ones are clean, man. Those are clean. Those are nice.
Thank you. It meant that in high school, I was cut from the team my freshman, sophomore, and junior, and then made it as a senior, and now I coach. So it just meant the world to me. So that's why both of those.
Oh, geez. This is like a sports movie. You're gonna have a sports movie after you when you win the state title or something. This is setting up nicely for you.
I appreciate that. Hopefully sometime, or maybe a book, and maybe
I'll give it to a kid will give it to me when I'm 65. It'll be good.
Maybe one day that'd be awesome. But thank you for all of that. But maybe thinking back to, I mean, you mentioned so much time and place has been such a big key thing for me, and you mentioned it as well. But I mean, your time and place is almost always revolving around basketball, because that's such a big part of your life. And I noticed in your Twitter bio, you put that basketball is 24/7. So I want to know what that other hour was.
I forgot to do this, and I feel terrible. We were BSing there in the beginning, and I completely lost track of my first goal. But one thing I always do, if I'm like giving a speech at a wedding or a thank you or in front of the team or something, it was kind of a joke, because my wife once threw a party for me, and I forgot to thank her in my speech that I gave at this party. So I now I try to start every speech, appearance, whatever, by saying thank you to her. That's kind of like a joke that her and I have together. But I do truly believe that, like, in this instance, I feel terrible for not starting this off by saying thank you to her, because really, you ask, like, what is that other hour in my 23/7? And most of it now is her and the kids. But to be honest, man, there's literally no chance I could coach if I didn't have someone at home who was really picking up the slack. I mean, God, coaching is weird when it comes to hours and travel. And even when you're home, like, I'm just nose in the computer, looking at ball screen coverages, looking at rotations, trying to figure out what they run coming out of timeouts. What do they do differently defensively coming out? It's just like a lot of hours spent nose in front of a computer. And you just need someone. If you're going to have a family, you need someone who is just so supportive of that lifestyle. And not everyone can be. Like, it's such a weird thing to do. And she really allows me to do that in a way that's like very, very healthy for me, because she allows me to do it, but she also reminds me on a very regular basis that, like, yo, it's a ball, like, it's a ball screen. You've seen a zillion balls. Stop pretending like you have to clip up the next 30 ball screen. So she does a really good job of finding that balance. I think it's just something that just, like, goes unsaid too much, especially coaches that have children. Like, I mean, she works full-time job. Her job's probably way more important than mine, but she still allows me to, like, pour so much time and energy into it. I need to say that. The second thing is, so if it's not family, it's probably soccer. I'm a huge soccer fan. It's one of the, like, most beautiful things to watch on TV is when you see, like, a triangle of soccer players and just bang, 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 3 one-touch passes, slip someone in behind for a goal. It's also a nice way for me to take my mind off basketball, just because there's a little bit of crossover, but not enough that I need to be, like, looking at the way they're doing things. And then if I'm not doing one of those two things, I'm probably looking at a map. I have, like, this weird obsession with maps. If you scroll through my Twitter, you'll probably see me tweeting that I love a good map every 5th or 6th tweet. But yeah, I'm a nerd at heart, so I like to sort of dive into random things like that every once in a while.
Well, the beauty of editing and podcasting is that I could always move things.
That'll be the first thing.
That's the first edit I'm making. Is you can't redo a best man speech or a post game talk to the team, but you can clip out the thank you to your wife and pop it in the beginning of the episode. So I'll make sure to do
Look at that.
That's the beauty of podcasting. That's how. That's
in the director's cut. In the director's cut, the truth will come out, but.
Definitely. But super cool, right? Thinking about, I mean, obviously, right, you're balancing so much. We were talking about the coaching side of things, right? I mean, you're doing so much, right, to keep yourself prepared, the team prepared, making sure that's all set. I noticed that one of the lessons that you learned at Project Coach, one of the initiatives you were doing, was really so many things, maybe much more basketball specific lessons about never staying next to another coach at practice, games being better than drills. Like, what did you really learn from that experience then that made you a better coach to maybe apply those lessons to your other stops?
Yeah, man. I mean, that was such an amazing, well, I kind of spent 2 years there. So I was a grad student. I went over to Greece for the year, and then I came back and worked for them again. It's an amazing model. So just to give you quickly the model, essentially it works in an underprivileged neighborhood in Springfield, Massachusetts, where there weren't a lot of youth coaches there. So what they did was, and what they still do and do a great job of, they train high school kids to be youth sports coaches in their neighborhoods. So just such a cool, like, leadership tool for high school kids. Essentially what they do is twice a week, they have, like, these coaching academies with the kids where they're really drilling them hard on how to run a fun practice for essentially like a 3rd, 4th, or 5th grader. The 2 sports, luckily for me, were soccer and basketball, which was awesome for sort of my interest. But yeah, they really get down to the nitty gritty when it comes to how to coach. And it's amazing how many of those principles that you can use with youth sports that you can translate to the highest levels of the game. So I think, were you looking at my website? I think that
website's been a goldmine for this podcast.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
I recommend our listeners check it out too. I mean, there's so many other little nuggets in there that we won't be able to get to, but it's some good stuff.
First one is huge. Like, I think the first one I put there is, like, you don't stand next to another coach, right? So we still talk about that at this day. Like, and our head coach is really locked into that. I don't think we've ever talked about it explicitly, but she's really big, like, you're like, get away from each other, just to make sure that you have coverage. I mean, we have 4 full-time coaches, but you still shouldn't be ever standing next to people. You should You should be really getting coverage of the court and making sure all angles are taken care of. And the second one that you mentioned, I am a huge believer of. I think this is actually becoming way more commonplace in coaching these days, which is, games over drills, reads over reps. I think it's one of the biggest problems with American players. So I do a lot of the international recruiting on staff. I find that international coaches are just so much better at this. And I think it's why you find so many international players in the NBA or in the WNBA or in college at all levels are labeled like the smart or crafty ones. It's because they have better coaches coming up. Even if you look at a lot of the trainers, I think they're getting better about this in America now, but like everything is rep based, triple moves, quadruple moves, and cones all over the place. And it's like, man, that's not teaching the kid to read the game. This is one thing we're actually really big at Columbia, but it's just setting up games that practice those skills, but while the kids are having to make reads on the fly. And I think the reason a lot of people get away from it is because it's not pretty. It doesn't, like, if you come watch some of the practice, they don't always look beautiful. Like, it's messy, there's turnovers, dribbling off feet, but those are the things that are going to translate, when you're making those reads at high speed. So I'm glad to see that that's becoming a much bigger part of youth coaching in America, because I really think it's going to help the kids in the long run. And then the last thing is I'm a verbose dude. Like, I could get going when it comes to explaining a drill, or like, hey, I got the Yale scout coming up for this weekend. Like, all right, Yale runs this dribble drive action, but like, you got to be careful because when it's 11 coming off, she's going to let the throw back. But when 1 is coming off, she's trying to get to her floater. It's like, dude, they don't need to know all this, It's like, you got 30 seconds, you got to set it up, you got to get them going, because the way they're going to learn is by getting out there doing it, not listening to me give a speech about a dribble drive concept that Yale runs beautifully and why that's going to be hard for us to guard. They don't care about all that. So, and they used to, at Project Coach, when we practice at Coaching Academy, boom, they hit the stopwatch. You had 30 seconds to get everyone set up and get the game going. And it was just like, it was amazing how many things you could do. And then we called them wrinkles there. So you get them set up 30 seconds, they play for a few minutes, boom, first wrinkle. And then you're just layering and layering and layering. And by the end of the game, you've gotten to 10 different wrinkles, and the game looks completely different than what it did like when you started for that first 30 seconds. So it's an amazing concept. It's something I'm really proud to have been a part of, a small part of, but they're still going strong. And those guys do awesome work up there.
It's incredible. And I wish I had something like Project Coach when I first started, because my freshman year of college, when I was like, yeah, I'll be the freshman coach. That sounds like fun. I had no idea what I was doing. So
yeah, no one does. It's great.
Definitely wish I had a little bit of a background. So that sounds incredible, thinking about that. But I mean, the big thing, whether it's at Columbia or just right, the basketball world is very big on this, but just at Columbia especially, right, the standard of excellence, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's on the court, is so high. And right, being in your comfort zone, it's nice to be in your comfort zone. It's comfortable, of course, but that's nothing. You can't really grow in that area. So how have you maybe seen that happen, maybe at Columbia or some of your other stops, where it's players getting out of their comfort zone and really seeing improvement, and how have you been maybe a big part of that process?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we do that is slightly different. So if you look at our roster, we don't have a lot of big players. Our coach's style that she likes to play is just a little bit more mobile and free flowing. But we're also we're a very good mid-major team right now, which wasn't always the case when I first got here, but we're still a mid-major team. So, we're not getting the pick of the litter when it comes to the top recruits in the country. So, one thing that we often do is we will recruit undersized mobile bigs who are sort of falling through the cracks for one reason or another. Are they on the wrong AAU team? Do they play for a team that doesn't let them shoot threes yet? Do they play for a team where they're, only a 4 or 5, so they're not getting a chance to showcase that they can handle the ball? But could we teach them to handle the ball? So that's the area that I work with a lot, forward. So that's something I'm always looking for. So there's a few tricks that we look for when we're evaluating kids in high school to look for some of that stuff. And then on the other side of the ball, on the other sort of end of the positional spectrum is guards. One of the things we try to get our guards to do a lot is to post up, just because they're great passers. So many people talk about getting the ball to the paint off the bounce. Sometimes it's just easier to go post the guard up, because a lot of times guards stink at guarding the post. So it's just easier to throw the ball down there to them. And then they're in the spot that you're trying to get them there to begin with. But it's not always super natural to them to put their butt into someone and stick their hand out to get open. So we try to kind of We'll try to recruit some bigger guards that we think are physical or could get stronger. We'll kind of look for some of those inefficiencies in the evaluation world. And then you kind of see when it all comes together at some points, like I said, sort of what those games that we were talking about at practice, I think it can be sloppy. Like you're asking a point guard who's never posted up to get in there and post up, or you're asking a big who's never shot a three in a game to take three of them in their first college game. You're going to have a few balls skip off the backboard or get thrown into row three. The payoff is pretty cool. The payoff is pretty cool when you got five people who kind of do a little bit of everything out there. I do think one of the other interesting things about Columbia specifically is it's an Ivy League school. So every kid here, we always talk about this, like every kid here for most of their lives have been the best athletes and the smartest kids in their class. And I think one of the huge growth areas that they take when they come to a place like this is like, that ain't the case anymore. Most of you will not be the best players on this team. And most of you will not be the smartest kids in your class. So it's like, how do you respond to that? So are you just going to be okay with that? Or are you going to not work as hard now because you're in the meat of the bell curve as opposed to at the top of it? Like, or are you going to, grit your teeth and try to get every little ounce that you can out of yourself? So that's something that we talk about a lot with our girls, and our head coach is really amazing. Just like every day, the standard is just so high. She really gets every little drop of juice out of these kids. So it's been a cool experience to be a part of. And like I said, the sort of the growth of the program over the last 5 years has just been really cool to see.
So it's great because you're talking so much about like having these values and staying consistent with it and growing the program like that. Now you guys are 9-3, winning games. What was the biggest thing maybe 4 or 5 years ago when you got to Columbia and you guys said, okay, this is how we're going to change this program? Like I've spoken to so many NBA coaches or GMs that have spoken about rebuilding their franchises, and that's a lot different right at the pro level than it is in college. How did you guys figure this out?
Well, we took lumps. I mean, we took lumps. I think one of the things we made a conscious decision of early was, we talked about, like, I think from a basketball standpoint, when it comes to style of play, like I think there are some coaches, their style of play is very malleable. They're talking about like, all right, this is my best player. This is what they do well. So how do we get the most out of this player right now to help us win? And I think early on, we kind of decided like, this is the style that we think could be most effective in our league and help us win games when we eventually are good enough to beat some Power 5 teams. Our head coach was like, I want to start implementing that style immediately. So did it always work with our personnel? Like, no, it didn't. But I think we thought like in the long run, this style is what's going to help our program be great. We thought like it worked with New York. It was something that could win at the mid-major level. It was something that we could recruit to. It was fun to play in. So we just wanted to implement it immediately, even if we didn't have the kids. And then I think this is true, not just with college basketball, but I think it gets the most press sometimes with college basketball. The kids who are there when you take over the program didn't sign up for the values that you're trying to instill in the program. I think that's hard. I think that's really, really hard. And I think it's like, it causes some abrasive moments at times where kids are very upfront with like, yeah, I don't want to say like I don't agree with this, but something along those lines. Like, this isn't what I'm about. Like, I signed up to play for a different coach. They sold me different values. They told me I was going to be this, that, and the other. And we're coming in with new ideas. And I think you do inherently when you take over programs, like there is some attrition. Like you lose some people along the way, but you just got to make sure that even with those people that you're upfront and honest about what you're trying to get out of them and why you're doing what you're doing with them. And in the long run, I think it works out. But there's no doubt that like, I wish I could give you some beautiful answer about the linear progression of the program, but like you got to make sure that you're doing your job when it comes to recruiting. You got to make sure that you're doing your job when it comes to player development. But above all, like you got to make sure that the kids that are in your program know that they're the most important things to you and not some kid coming down the road in 2 or 3 years. So like, even when we weren't good, even when we had kids that maybe fit our style of play. I still remember a girl who was the rookie of the year in our conference. She was has been a two-time all-league player as a freshman and sophomore. She was on her official visit, and our head coach was getting into our team. And she was on her official visit on the sideline. And she was like, do you think I give a bleep about what she thinks right now? Like, no, she's not on my team right now. Like, I care about you guys in this circle. And it was like a really powerful moment. And I was like, damn, like, we want that kid, but she's right. Like, she's not here. She ain't saving us on Thursday night when we got to go play. Like, so just making sure everyone knows that when they're there, because I think that's what ends up winning in the long run.
And that's kind of the theme I'm understanding, is that nothing really is, whether it's with you or the program, is cookie cutter at all, right? I mean, everything, right? The values are maybe the same throughout and very consistent, but the approach you're taking to each and every person is very different, whether it's from what you said about your lessons at Project Coach, or even your work with diverse city hoops. I'm sure, right? I don't know if there's a little like imaginary hyphen in between that. But like I'm sure, I mean, how important was that for you to realize that, you know what, like, as great as all these lessons are, I had to kind of apply them to each player or each person differently?
Yeah, I think that's something. I mean, I was a point guard in college. Like, to tie it to basketball, like, everyone likes the ball in a different spot when you're passing it to them. But like, I would always ask, like, do you like bounce passes? Do you like chest? Like, where do you like the ball? And I think that just kind of bleeds over into everything. And honestly, I think our head coach is better at it than I am. Like, sometimes because I do think, like, yo, it's exhausting. Like, when you got to think about the way every single person is going to receive a message and how can we tailor it to that person and when do they need to hear it? Why? Like, yo, that's a lot. We got 15 girls on our team and they all need a little bit something different. But I think our head coach, man, she is so good at that. And it's been really cool to kind of just be around. We had individual meetings for 10 minutes today with every single player on our team. And it really all came out of this idea, like, this one kid hadn't had a good last two practices. And she really just came back to, like, she just hasn't seen us enough. Like, she hasn't seen us enough in the last few days. Like, we need to get in front of her right now. And then we kind of started going down the line. We're like, damn, every kid needs us right now for 10 minutes. Like, all right, get it on the calendar. We got 2 hours. Boom, we're banging this out for 2 hours. And like I said, it's like, it's exhausting. It's exhausting at times thinking it like that. But what's the alternative? I don't know what the alternative is, unfortunately. Just kind of like rolling the ball out and hoping that your offense is good enough to get it done probably isn't going to work, unfortunately. So like I said, it's one thing that, especially during the season, I find myself not always putting the mental space that I need when I'm getting lost in scouts and lost in practice plans and lost in my film session with kids. But I think our head coach is so good bringing it back to those things at points. So she's taught me a lot about taking a step back and thinking about the kid, even in like the midst of all the craziness sometimes.
So, I mean, if one thing's for sure, it's that whether it's you, the program itself, your head coach, everyone's prepared and knows what they're doing, and the preparation going into the season and the way that each player is kind of communicated to is one that I think everyone's going to enjoy and everyone's going to get better from. So whether it's coming out to a game, I got to come out to a game soon or something and see this firsthand, but I'm excited.
Yeah, man.
For the rest of the season. What are you most excited for this season? I mean, what are maybe some of the hopes and dreams of the coaching staff and the players as to what can come out of the season?
We've been talking about this a lot, but the phrase we've been using is just unfinished business. So 2 years ago, Columbia women's basketball, to be blunt, has been bad for a long time. And 2 years ago, we were about to go play in the first postseason game in the history of Columbia women's basketball on a Friday night against Princeton, who I believe was number 19 in the country, undefeated in the Ivy League. We had just lost two of our starters. We didn't care. We were going in there, going to let it rip for 40 minutes. And on Tuesday, the world changed. The Ivy League tournament was the first thing canceled. I remember we just felt like it wasn't fair. The Big East tournament was still happening. The NBA, everything was still happening. Little did we know the world was going to change dramatically in 48 hours. And we lost our season last year. So we just really feel like we have unfinished business. We have essentially our whole team back, minus one of those players. It's obvious that we're going for an Ivy League title. Like, that is what we so desperately want. But we really just want to like really raise the standards of what this program is and how it's perceived. And we know if we do that every single day in practice, that it'll kind of take care of itself in the end. So we talk about the Ivy League a lot, but we don't talk about the Ivy League championship a lot. we talk about just being, so our internal culture is edge, energy, discipline, grit, and excellence. We talk about that every single day. We don't always have the best practices, but I do think that if anyone ever came to one of our practices, they would believe every single letter in edge, that was important to us. So yeah, man, we're excited. We're so excited. And we just want, like, all this COVID stuff is now scaring us, because God, we just want to start playing in the Ivy League and have a chance to go win an Ivy League title come March. That's really all we want. We don't want that chance to be taken away from us. We're doing everything we can to make sure that's the reality.
Definitely. I mean, you rattled off that acronym for EDGE in like 0.2 seconds. So I might have to even.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna have to go back and forth. What is that? That's a pretty cool one.
So yeah, so it's EDGE, energy, discipline, grit, and excellence. And I said it's all. So we actually brought this up earlier, but talking about those informal times, right? So like our head coach, she's got edge. Like, you talk to her for 5 minutes, you know it. And that's why I always say, like, it works so good. It works so well for our program because that's who she is. That's the types of kids she recruits. That's the type of practices she has. When we're on the bus, like, that's how she talks before games. When we're at dinner, like, she has such edge and just kind of like everything that she does that it just bleeds off into the rest of us. And like I said, that's during practices, but it's also in these like weird random times where you can just feel her edge. And then we break that down into, the four pillars of what we want this program to be all about. And I personally think the first E is what we do best. Like, if you ever come to a practice of ours or even a game, I mean, we are so loud. I can't even hear half the time. When they're stretching, they're all yelling about defensive coverages. They are just so loud. They're so loud.
I'm jealous, man. We can't get our guys at the high school. We can't get our guys to talk. They're all super quiet.
Yeah, it's definitely I think it's a college. It's a college thing. I've seen very few high schools that are elite communicating teams. I don't know what it is.
That's a great question. It's a question I've never gotten an answer to.
Yeah. But yeah, it's cool. The edge thing is cool. And like I said, I think it's because she lives it on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. And it's really easy for us to just to sort of feel her energy and feel her approach and just model it.
Definitely. I mean, whether it's a practice or a game now, post-COVID, I'm gonna have to make that trip happen, because that edge sounds like it's something special. And it definitely seems like something I definitely want to just I feel like if you just see it, you just get it. From hearing about it, just doesn't do it justice. So
yeah. We got to get you out here. We'll sneak you some gear too. We'll
I'm down to.
I don't know if it's worthy of being framed in the background just yet, but we'll get you something.
Columbia is a special program, and who knows if I end up applying there for grad school or something, that might be definitely something.
There you go.
On this wall, so who knows? That might be
there. You go.
TBD coming up soon, but I would have to make something drop. So I mean, maybe I'll ask your listeners to put in the comments: should Porzingis go or yeah? Oh man, it's gonna be. It's Porzingis. Let's be real. There's no other wall space, so someone's got to drop. It's not going to be Giannis. Let me just take him.
I mean, you're holding on strong. What was he there? 3 or 4 years?
So he was my whole childhood. That's what's difficult.
Oh,
and
gotcha.
I watched him sign that jersey, and same thing with Giannis. But like I watched him sign it. So like Wilson Chandler, I like number 21. I wore it. David Lee, nice jersey. He was my early childhood, but it's just a little. I mean, I can't replace it. It's hard. I mean, look, if I'm being honest with you, if someone offered me a Julius Randle jersey, I'd throw in some cash on top of the Porzingis once I ship it out. It's kind of like a first round pick on top of the Porzingis when I ship it out for sure.
So you're a Randle guy now. Huh?
Randle, RJ, anyone. I mean, my favorite player is Obi. He's just so like fun and cool to be around.
Yeah. The Knicks fans love him, huh?
He's the only guy at the practice facility that talks to me. So whenever I go to the practice facility, he'll be the one to kind of shoot a quick joke or something. Yeah, so definitely the Porzingis will have to go. And I saw Columbia blue jersey.
That would work well with the Xavier stuff.
Oh no, it's gonna really be a really well finished wall. So I have to make that happen.
Yeah,
but Coach,
I like that.
Really, the lessons you shared, I'm gonna have to. I mean, I always go through this one, no matter every episode, no matter what, to kind of clip it, see what sounds good for Instagram highlights. This one, you get limited to 10 on Instagram. I might have to make a second post or something to kind of extend that, something like that.
Oh yeah.
Do this episode some justice. This was just littered with good ones. Everyone check out your website, see those books. You should put a list of all the books you've read. I think that would be incredible.
I should. I actually have them all saved. I have them all saved. I should put them up there. I just hope people don't ask me like for a synopsis of some of them, because I mean some of them have been amazing, but I gotta tell you, every third or fourth book, there's like, They're not all bangers, I'll tell you that much.
Definitely, that's gotta be a fun project. No matter what it was. I mean, this episode was incredible. I can't wait to put it out there. I know I'll be getting a bunch of texts, people saying, "Wow, that episode with Coach Ray was really a special one." So thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me. It's been cool, kind of scrolling through, seeing all the people you've talked to, and just to be a part of that list has been really fun for me. So thank you again for having me on tonight.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.